Hey folks, good evening. Good evening. Thanks so much for coming in. As we see our number climb here. Um, yeah, this is good. This is good. All right. All right. Well, in the name of honoring our start time and making sure that we get as much conversation in as we can, I'll get this started. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want the preamble that you missed, certainly have a chance to take a look at that in good time. But mostly, I just want to say thank you to everybody. I'm John Botti. I'm lucky enough to be the head here at Browning, and I'm really thrilled that you would make time for a conversation between me and one of my friends and colleagues at the end of what I'm sure has been a long day. We call this one Learning to Lead, and it's the second installment in kind of a three-part webinar series that we've envisioned for this year. In November, Assistant Head of School and Director of Enrollment, Janet Leanne, and I got to have a conversation principally about the new building on East 64th Street and what we think that augurs for our boys, for our community, how it's going to help make a great school get even greater. But tonight we want to turn our attention to our current space, and the boys are going to continue to inhabit that space and continue to thrive in it and give it the attention it deserves. So many of you submitted really great questions for us to consider as we spoke tonight, and what we tried to do was consolidate them and kind of group them thematically. And so if your particular question doesn't get asked, I hope you'll see a family resemblance to it in something that we get a chance to discuss. Our plan is to go till 7:45, so about 43 more minutes, and we want to make the best use of that time. I just really appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate the chance to share a conversation with one of my good friends and great colleagues, our head of middle school, Ophelia. Ophelia, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here, John.
Yeah, it's a good time, and
Yeah.
it's a nice way to punctuate the end of February and have a discussion about what's coming down the pike. And what's coming down the pike. We've talked about East 64th Street, I think, a lot, and are celebrating that for good reasons. But there's so much good that's going to continue to happen here, and in fact, ways in which the space may change to accommodate some of our learners. So I was wondering if you might give our audience a little bit of a sense of what kind of major upgrades that they can expect to see in our present building this year, and kind of like what you're most excited about in terms of what spatial adjustments we'll be able to make.
Awesome. Thanks for that question, John. Yeah, so this is my third year at Brownie as head of middle school, right? So I came and interviewed for this job in 2022, in February. And when I was offered the job, I was very excited. And then in May, the announcement for the new high school building came out, and the knowledge of sixth grade is going to expand. We're going to rethink the East 62nd Street building into a K-8 space and having a K-8 program that's dedicated, housed in this space. And I remember turning to my husband when that announcement came out, and I said, this job just got a whole lot better. And a lot of my background is in startup schools and in thinking about new environment and how we can leverage that as an opportunity for increasing the quality of education program that we can provide to children, right? And for a school with as much history and legacy and strength as Browning to have the opportunity to rethink some of the way that we do things and to build on that strength and make these choices really intentionally. I think it's a really rare opportunity. And our conversation of redesigning the East 62nd Street building didn't come kind of just from this year, right? We've been having that conversation intentionally over the course of the past 2, 3 years. And the decisions that we came to are all from the question of what serves our mission, what serves the developmental needs of this particular age group, and what serves us as an institution, right, to be able to provide the best experience for our boys. So what's coming down the pike? We have redesigned all of our science labs so that they can serve the inquiry of our growing scientists at each particular age, right? So that's lower school, that's the higher grades in the lower school and the lower grades in the middle school, and then also boys that are almost ready to be in high school and do some serious research work, right? So we've redesigned our science lab, we redesigned our technology lab to be the same purpose. And so they are all going to be outfitted with equipment and with furnitures that are suitable for the learning needs of this age group. We are adding a middle school student lounge. So that's something that students have been been asking for years over years, and
You sure
they
have.
given
Sure
a
have.
lot of input into the things that they want to see in this space.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to move our learning center into a bigger classroom. And so we're going to be able to support more boys as they come in, as they just need a little bit of check-in, a little bit of small group executive functioning support. But if I have to pick like two things that I'm most excited about, I would say that I'm really excited about the library. Um,
Hmm.
I believe that library needs to be the center of school life.
Hmm.
And I think that um like our library is located on the first floor. Like it's one of the first things that you see when you walk through the lobby. And our librarian has done such a good job making it a welcoming space, right? Making it a space of social connection, of learning, of inquiry. And I'm excited for that to be more of a middle school space. Like I want middle schoolers to feel at home in that space, to feel like um they can connect with one another, they can feel comfortable. Right now the upper schoolers use it for a lot of their um um free periods if they're doing homework, and our lower school boys certainly do, and middle schoolers are scheduled in there for classes. But I
Hmm.
would love to see them kind of just inhabit that space, right? And with that space we hired a full-time middle school librarian. And I'm really excited about the person that we hire. She has a ton of experience. I'm already talking to her about ideas of how we can carve out time for dedicated reading, how we can enlist student leadership in terms of choosing the books that we include in our collection, right? How we can create family programming to create this culture of reading, and what collaboration with faculty in terms of research and supporting curriculum might look like. And so I think that the library will really become the center of middle school life. Um, and then
Really.
second space, I'm talking a lot, but
No,
there's
it's
a
all
lot that
right.
I'm excited about.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'm excited about is an indoor movement space.
Hmm.
So what is currently the weight room, an athletic office, is going to be redesigned, reconstructed, repurposed to be an indoor movement space. And it will be completed with climbing wall and with a ceiling that has, ninja style attachment, much more kind of advanced than your typical monkey bar situation, where boys can kind of travel from one side on a climbing wall all the way across the room and then climb down the other side. Yeah, we're going to provide these big body movement opportunities for boys in the middle of the day, and we know that they need that, right, to be
Yeah.
able to engage in their learning. um,
Wow. First of all, sign me up, right? And it sounds like it's incredibly intentional in the way you've sort of thought about it. I can see the excitement. I'm curious, so you mentioned the library and you mentioned, the movement space. So we have something on the first floor and the fourth floor. Part of what goes on in our building now is there's a lot of kind of, frankly, interdivisional integration, right, in terms of how boys pass and interact with one another. Do you have a sense, and I know it's early days, we haven't seen how the boys will move in it here next year, but do you have a sense of how the space will be shared or divided between the middle and lower school, between the guys who are sticking around next year?
Yeah, John, you're absolutely right. Like one of my favorite things is just watching the boys kind of come up the stairs together, right? And some of the casual interactions that they have with one another. A big boy giving a little guy a high five, or helping them carry a bag just for a few steps up the stairs, right? And the chatter that they have, and like just to see kind of how the lower school boys are comfortable talking to someone who's much older, and perhaps in another school would feel intimidated by that, but like that's just a normal part of our day to day, right? And we don't want to lose that. And so we're intentional. I've been working with Eric Ogden a lot on like which spaces are shared middle and lower school, right? Which spaces are dedicated, and how we can create kind of pathways of travel so that they still have organic ways of meeting up with one another in kind of casual, informal, serendipitous with the ways. We can do that by design. I'm thinking about the music room will continue to be shared, right? And the art room will be shared to a certain extent. Um, and we want that kind of natural sense of like community and care and support to continue to exist. And I talked a little bit about the science lab, right? We're going to have three science labs in this building with one dedicated lower school science lab, one dedicated middle school science lab, and then one lab that's kind of a little bit in between, right? And and it's fitted to kind of our curriculum as the K-8 sequence of scientific inquiry and skill building develops, right? They need different equipments, different tools, also different furnitures as their bodies grow, right? So we see kind of a little bit of cross-pollination there in our design as well. But then we also need dedicated space, right?
Yeah, sure
We
do.
probably would not want a middle, we probably don't want like a lower school guy in the middle school lounge, like that's a space where they can relax, like it's their home, they can hang out in there and be their kind of preteen selves, and we want them to have ownership, we want their leadership to kind of come through and telling us this is how we want to live into our school. And really, like what I'm looking forward to the most is for every kid to be like, this is my favorite place on campus, and this is why, right? And
Mm.
every single one of our boys are unique, and they have unique interests and passions and skills and talents, and we want them to find a place that they can feel like is theirs, right? Like this is this is what's special to me at this school on this campus.
Ah, that's really great to hear. I mean, we so often talk about trying to create a sense of welcome or even a sense of ownership for our boys here, that they should feel like this is in some respects their home. But I don't know that we've always thought about that in a spatial dimension. And so I think it's really, really interesting that you bring it up. And I'm grateful to you and Eric for all your intentionality and collaboration around that. So it sounds like there's going to be a lot of, kind of like social and physical, benefits to the space that's kind of been reclaimed and refigured. I'm wondering if you see any, and you mentioned a little bit, but I wonder you might go a little bit deeper on some of the effect that on our academic program that this might have, whether it's in terms of the curriculum we offer, the schedule we're allowed to give to our boys, or how we create staff where we're ensuring the kind of interactions that we want to have as a relational school. I was wondering if you could give us a little sense of that as we go forward.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, space is the third teacher. And some of the biggest impacts on our program is going to come from changes that sound really small and insignificant, right? Like you walk in and you see a climbing wall and the boy goes, wow, like, right? Like that's something that you can show on admissions tour. That's something that you can, you kind of showcase and be excited about. You put it on a brochure, you put it in our magazine, right? But some of the changes are going to be much more subtle, but they're really going to make an impact. For example, every middle school advisory will have a home base.
Mm,
Right. That's not something that we've been able to do because so many of our classrooms are shared with upper school and used for so many different purposes, right? But we will now have a situation where boys, small cohorts of boys, will be able to return to a space multiple times a day, right? We're
mm,
going to create intentional time in our schedule where they're advisor led and they emphasize what we call core four, the things that we know are really good for boys' development.
mm,
The connection, executive functioning or studentship, storytelling, constructive dialogue. And our advisory program is going to be intentionally built around these four skills. And our advisor will have a dedicated space where they can lead some of these conversations, and their group will grow into their particular classroom, right? They get to decorate it, they get to make it their own, they get to memorialize the conversations that they have in these advisory lessons in ways that's kind of physical and visible, right? They get to, whether it's create kind of agreements or showcase individual personalities for the sake of connections and honoring each person's dignity and individuality, right? Like that can all memorialize in a classroom, and that's something that we've been able to do before. We've also not really been able to like have a dedicated world language classroom, for example,
mm,
where we can have materials on the wall and signage in the target language, right? Where teachers can point to in the middle of a lesson to really reinforce and give cues. Before Browning, I taught at a Mandarin immersion school, and that's something that we use to great effects, right? To use the classroom space to really create kind of an immersive environment for the learning of the target language. And we're going to be able to do that next year. So that's all very, very exciting to me.
yeah,
Um,
very clearly.
yeah.
Very clearly. I didn't mean to cut
And
you
you
off.
asked about staffing too, John.
Yeah.
And we've historically had a middle and upper school cross-divisional faculty.
Mhm.
And there's something that's really lovely about that, right? If you have a boy who had this teacher in seventh grade and then again in ninth grade and then again in 11th grade, right? That continuity of relationship and seeing the growth arc of the student is really powerful. Um, but in creating kind of a separate upper school building with a K-8 building, we we've we've opened up a new opportunity, right? Middle school teachers are the ones who recognize um, the the importance of teaching some of these things intentionally. Like you have to teach connection, you have to teach executive function, you have to practice that with them, and you have to kind of like be comfortable with the messiness of being with middle school boys, where one day they're going to um, break down in tears over something that seems so insignificant and is just um, you're really trying hard to kind of process and understand kind of what happened to them. But then the next day says the most mature, profound thing, right? And both of these people exist in the same body and they're the same person. And we hold that gently and lovingly, right? And we walk them through all of these different moments. Like we've given our faculty a choice. Do you want to go to upper school or do you want to go to middle school? And the folks that have chosen to be with middle school love this age group.
Mm.
Like how many people do you meet out there in the world that want to spend 40 hours every week hanging out with middle school boys?
Yeah.
Like, they are going to love your son so well, and that's really the strength that we draw from our program.
It's a point really well made, and I appreciate that. I also love this notion of space being the third teacher, which I think captures so much. I just want to make sure that our friends caught this notion of a core four. Would you be able to just speak like just so we're all clear what those are again?
Yeah. So we've been talking kind of as a faculty about just like all the research that is all that research tells us about kind of boys' development, right? And what will allow boys to become compassionate and courageous men, like our mission says we want to develop them into, and to have kind of a life well lived, and um to yeah, just like grow into these adults and be successful in college and in life, right? And we've kind of come up with in diving into all of this research is connection. So that's really clear and I think easy to understand if you've been in our community for a while. We talk a lot about being a relational school. We talk about relationships between a boy and a teacher serving as the foundation of their learning, right? They need to feel cared for. They need to feel like you're a champion for them in order to access learning. That's true for everybody, but especially true for boys. But in designing our curriculum, we're talking about brotherhood, right? We're talking
Mm.
about the friendships that they develop. There's a epidemic of loneliness in American society, and we talk about kind of the male loneliness as kind of an aspect of that. And we as a school, believe that these are skills that can be taught. Like what does it mean to care for a friend, right? What does it mean to make connections? What does it mean to be your authentic self and know who you are, and then to be able to relate to people on that level, right? And we create spaces and experiences in the school day where they can practice that and get better at it. Um,
Mm.
and then we talk about executive functioning. So that's the second of the core four. That's very edu speak, right? It's part of the research literature, but in common language, it's just what does it mean to be a student, right? So we're thinking a lot about kind of how to middle school. What does that mean? And we actually have a committee that's just called Stuff. And what the committee is doing is that it's a group of teachers that's interested in thinking about like how do we set boys up for success in terms of like how they organize their lockers, how they organize their backpacks. And we're thinking about questions like, do we want a one-to-one laptop program or do we want a class set? And what skills does it practice? And what are the unintended consequences of just helping them navigate their day and have all the materials that they need, right? And be successful in that way. And we know that in middle school, like having solid work habits is actually a greater predictor of high school success than having strong knowledge of the content subject that you were taught.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a very intentional part of our curriculum, teaching you how to be a student. And then the third one is storytelling. And we're featured in the Boy Mom book, right? Our modern masculinities curriculum, and the lesson is called The Listening Project. And that's in understanding someone else's story, right? Being curious and asking questions. But then storytelling is also about kind of knowing your own story and being able to authentically share that. And that we believe is kind of the foundation of giving life meaning and purpose, is being able to hear someone else's story and to tell your story. And then the last one is constructive dialogue. And that's really the foundation of kind of our civic society. Like that's civics. That's understanding that there's a difference between argument and a fight, making logical inferences, the critical thinking skills that it takes, right? Media literacy, all of those kind of research, all of those go into what it means to engage in constructive dialogue.
Ophelia, thank you. I mean, I get pretty excited when I just think about when we consider the things that we're not sure society is giving to boys in its understanding of boyhood, that we can be really intentional about that in order to perpetuate an excellent manhood. And that's fun. And I appreciate you letting us go a little deeper on that. You know, as we think about boys becoming men, I think we'll note that next year, like 9th through 12th graders, almost men, won't be in this space anymore. I'm related to two of them. I'm going to miss them, but I'm going to be glad they're on East 64th Street. I'm wondering what you see as possible, effects of that, particularly in terms of how it affects the middle school boys' capacity and opportunity for leadership.
Yeah.
What opportunities you see? What kind of challenges are we ready to overcome with the kind of changing demographic and the changing ecology in our building that'll follow from that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think historically, because we are a shared middle and upper school faculty, the middle school has done a lot with the upper school, right? And a lot of it is kind of organic. We would have a faculty member that happens to teach sixth grade and 10th grade and knows two students that they can facilitate kind of a mentoring relationship with. Like a lot of it kind of comes out in, let's say grade level team meeting, where we say, oh yeah, this big boy would actually be really good in connecting with this kid. And so we'll have to be much more intentional about that, right?
Mm,
And we have to kind of create programs. Like we can't just rely on osmosis of enabling these relationship to happen. But we have that DNA, right? Like we are a K-12 school, and it means a lot to us that we're a K-12 school. And so we're starting to formalize some of those things, right? Like we're formalizing kind of peer tutoring and peer mentorship, and creating spaces and time and opportunities for signups, and a process for pairing, just to make sure that those continue, right?
mhm,
And there's kind of an intentionality in everything that we do, right? So I've been talking to Mr. Wilson, because both the middle school and the upper school are engaging in a schedule redesign process to think about what about this new building separation that allows us to kind of open up the schedule and design it in a different way. And in we're engaging in two separate processes, but we're in conversation with one another to make sure that we are leaving these spaces where upper school and middle school boys can continue to interact, right? So we kind of ended up with this Monday afternoon community time situation where it's going to be pretty easy for us to create joint programming, or for middle school boys to go over to the new building, or to have clubs meet up, or do different things like that. There's a space that we've kind of carved out to
mhm,
enable those opportunities to still happen. Um, and then I think what's really exciting, like the opportunity, is that we get to do much more with the lower school, right?
mm,
A few years ago, there was a student that kind of suggested, like, can we do some homework help, right? And they organized a group of students to be at the after school Panther sports program,
mm,
and sitting with the third and fourth graders and helping them with their math homework. And that was a huge help to the teachers supervising Panther sport, and also just for the boys to have that kind of older buddy helping them. Um, and we can follow the students' lead in that. They have a lot of ideas. They want to go into kindergarten. Recently we had an advisory where middle schoolers and lower schoolers worked together on a social impact project. They wrote cards for the LA fire, families that are affected by the LA fire, and they also pack sandwiches to donate to community fridges, right? And so we're going to be able to kind of lean into that much more in a K-8 situation. Um, and I think I really think that we're going to be kind of the best of both worlds. Like I came from a pre-K-8 school before I was at Browning, and so much of what we talk about is it's good for middle school because they get all of these leadership opportunities, right? They get to be the big kids on campus. They get a lot of voice, and they get to see kind of what they're capable of, right? And kind of put on a stage a lot more. And we're going to be able to do that. But the challenge of a pre-K school is that the pressure of high school admissions just take over your life, especially towards kind of the end of your time there. And I've seen that in my students. Um, and and at Browning, like you're able to kind of grow with the school into a really, really strong upper school program. And so you don't have to kind of worry about that part of it. So yeah, I mean, in terms of specific leadership opportunity that we want to create, I'm working with the admissions office on training our eighth graders to be admissions tour guides.
Oh
Um,
wow. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I've kind of floated it a little bit with some of the boys in student council that is already kind of taking on that role. They've spoken at admissions events as a student panelist, and they're psyched about it. They love the school. They want to represent it. They want to kind of talk about how awesome it is to be here, and and it's a great practice for them in terms of presenting, relating, acting maturely and professionally. So I'm really excited.
That's fantastic. There's, we as a community, of course, are committed to the idea that everyone has dignity, has inherent worth that will always belong to them, and that cannot and should not be taken. But there's so much research about boys, about them wanting to lead lives of significance, right?
Mhm.
And it just strikes me that you're giving a sort of micro opportunity or a local opportunity for in-building significance that might have been harder to find in when we have 430 boys all in this one space. I'm really, really heartened to hear about that. Just to kind of circle back to some of what you talked about with the middle and upper school interaction. I think it might help some folks if we had some reassurance that certain kind of affinity groups or athletic teams are still going to be able to incorporate both middle and upper schools. Like there's no plan to do away with those sorts of things, is there?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, right now we have middle school boys on varsity squash team, varsity golf team, table tennis. Occasionally we've had them play on baseball and basketball, even if they're really, really skilled. And those opportunities will absolutely still continue. And we there's a lot of kind of extracurricular activity, co-curricular activity, especially that happens before school or after school, things like the green team or debate
Mhm.
or mock trial. Those will be opportunities that are continue to be open to middle school students if they're interested. And we're very committed to kind of maintaining those cross-divisional ties. And that's something that's important to our faculty too. We have middle school
Yeah.
teacher in choosing to be at middle school. The one thing that they want is like I can continue to teach coach varsity, right? And if they couldn't, perhaps they didn't want to be in middle school, right? So it's really important to us that we keep those ties alive.
Yeah, I appreciate that commitment. I've certainly seen it in the way you and Eric and John and others have been planning. And I know it's meaningful to our adults, in part because it redounds to the kids in such an important way. So thank you for speaking to that. We've talked about kind of, the opportunities that have come for spatially, some of the programmatic opportunities that we think are going to emerge. There's a lot of kind of reorganization going around middle school, right? And next year will actually be the first year where middle school is exclusively a three grade division as fifth grade joins the lower school. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you think that's going to affect the kind of intra-grade dynamics, what it's going to mean for sixth grade, how we're thinking about acclimating boys to sixth grade, how we're thinking about kind of making this kind of transition, and what you think the kind of shape and contour of that will be next year.
Yeah, yeah. I think that sixth grade becoming kind of the single point of entry for middle school, whether you've been at Browning throughout lower school or whether you are coming in through the sixth grade expansion, is going to make a huge difference for us. Um, you know, um, it allow us to kind of concentrate our resources on and our attention on thinking about how do we teach this cohort of boys how to be together with one another, right? To connect with one another. We can create intentional programming for them to get to know each other. And we see sixth grade as kind of the most effective time where like a month and a half in, you can't really tell which boys are new to Browning and which one have been here forever, right? And it's because we create a lot of opportunities for them to get to know one another. The buddy programs, the Governor's Island trip where they're in advisory groups, and things like that, and at the end of the sixth grade, they have the trip to the China Folk House to kind of culminate this experience where they really kind of come together as one cohort of student. But we're also kind of thinking about intentionally teaching about the studentship aspect of it, right? So in sixth grade, they're going to transition to using Canvas as our learning management system. And Canvas it has a lot of different functionality and a lot of tools that will allow teachers to kind of assign unique educational resources to students to use at home. But it's also an onboarding process, right? We need to kind of teach them, this is how you find assignments, this is how you submit it, this is how you communicate with teachers, this is how you write an email, this is how you sign up for office hour, right? And this is like we actually want you to self-advocate, right? Like if you say I've spent 2 hours on this homework, we don't want you to be spending 2 hours. Like we want you to spend 45 minutes and then write to your teacher and tell them why you're stuck and then say, can we actually meet during quiet study tomorrow, right? Those are all things that we are going to be kind of intentionally building into the sixth grade onboarding process, because those are success predictors for our middle school students. Um,
Yeah. Well, it's really well said. I mean, because I think we know as educators that sometimes the best thing we do to catch learning is to make explicit that which has been implicit, right? Is to surface things which we assume. I know for a long time, there's been a discourse in independent schools about executive functioning or studentship being something that boys and students should be bringing to school on their own. And I think one of the more healthy developments and healthier recognitions has been, in fact, we do kids a disservice if we're not teaching to that and addressing needs that, particularly in an increasingly wired, increasingly digital society, they're not catching in the same way outside of school. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thanks for letting me pontificate. I know this is supposed to be your time, Ophelia, but I appreciate that. Look, I think I appreciate you illuminating all the ways in which this space is going to be fantastic or continue to be fantastic for our middle guys. But I'm sure there's some curiosity about opportunities for the middle guys, the middle school boys, to find their way to East 64th Street and dip their toe or maybe jump full in to some of the things going on there. I know it's early days, and it's you mentioned that we're still kind of in the process of working through a schedule review and things like that. So I don't want to suggest there's anything you've got chiseled in granite here. But do you have any sense of like how often or in what capacity middle school boys might be able to get to the new building?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we're throwing out lots of ideas and brainstorming kind of different possibilities there, right? The most obvious one would be um, sports games.
Mm.
We love it when our home team fans go over to cheer on uh the team, and to have a home gym would make a big difference. Like we had such a powerful show of force with our varsity basketball game that really spanned kind of across multiple divisions, and we made an away game look like it's our home game. And so, it's gonna be even more powerful when we have our home gym and it has the big B letter on it, and we can cheer in the stands. And I would love to enable middle school boys to go over there for that. And then, performances, right, would be another way. And then I'm thinking about class presentations too, because that's something that happens occasionally when we're here too. When we think about like, here is a topic that the upper schoolers are studying that they're presenting about that middle school boys can maybe be audience for. Like we had some of our guys go to a practice presentation of the upper school robotics team. They invited us because they wanted to practice, but also because it will be really good for the middle guys to kind of hear what the upper schoolers are doing. So we'll continue to create those opportunities. We're also thinking about kind of, can we have regular lunches together and what would that look like, right? And um yeah, so we're brainstorming kind of different ideas. Like nothing is quite set, like we don't have it on the calendar for like on this date, this is what we're gonna do. Um
Yeah.
but there'll be connections and opportunities like that.
Well, I appreciate that. And look, I know that I have such strong faith in both the intentionality and the collaboration of our division heads. So I'm really just kind of enthused to see what emerges. And I think it's great to note that this is something that's not just on our mind, but has been on our mind for a while. And it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, Ophelia, again, speaking of sort of middle and upper school continuity or conversation, you mentioned earlier that we're not going to see the kind of typical overlap between middle and upper school faculty, and we've noted there's some things about that we're going to miss, but there are also really really strong and really enthusing reasons for a kind of dedicated middle school faculty and a dedicated upper school faculty. But one of the things I think we're wondering about is when you lose that kind of or that conversational continuity is reduced. How have you thought about how we might kind of ensure or really promote smooth transitions between divisions, whether it's lower school to middle school or really middle school to upper school, particularly when that involves a leap of building to a different faculty. I know again that's down the road, but I'm curious if you've been thinking about that or you and your colleagues have been talking about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I appreciate, noting the collaboration that exists among the division heads, and I think a lot of that is in kind of the strong working relationship that Eric, John, and I have, right? We meet weekly with Danielle Pasno, our assistant head of school and director of teaching and learning, and we have all sorts of different conversations. We have conversations about curricular alignment, we have conversations about student culture, we have conversations about kind of processes and policies and protocols and just making sure that there's consistency kind of across the board. I think the tragedy of some K-12 schools is that as you move through the different divisions, it's starting to feel like they're different schools, that the
Mm.
practices and the culture and it gets so different from one another. And that's not been the case at Browning. Like it really is one school, and there's a consistency of experience, and there's a consistency of expectation and culture across the different divisions, and we'll continue to maintain that. And curricularly in terms of transition, we have a department chair structure that will remain, right? So even though in terms of kind of the daily supervision of faculty and giving of feedback, and that will exist kind of in a K-8 and upper school structure, right? Because it makes sense for the person to be closely collaborating with those that they see daily, right? And we don't believe that anyone's going to do a particularly good job trying to oversee faculty in both buildings. But we have a structure that will enable, the two history department chairs to meet on a regular basis, and for the collective of all K-12 department chairs to meet on a regular basis, right? And those are the spaces that we talk about, like what is our AI policy and philosophy, right? Like um how do we ensure that we are not only catching plagiarism, but really inspiring boys to make honest choices and take learning into their own hands, and like take responsibility for their own learning, right? And what are interdisciplinary collaboration possibilities, right? And what are pedagogy that are best for boys learning, right? Like making sure that some of those things happen. What are equitable hiring practices that will allow us to attract the most talented faculty members to join our ranks. Yeah, so those are all conversations that happen among kind of the department chairs, um, and and that is one of the structures that will ensure us to continue to remain aligned.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's heartening to know that we're going to remain a community of professional conversation. I think that's one of the things that's so crucial to the successes we've enjoyed. Why folks, I believe, like working here,
Yeah.
and certainly what helps them make them really, really effective for our learners. And you've look, I'm biased. I get to meet with you well multiple times a week, and I get to see your mind at work, and most importantly, I get to see just your imagination and your heart leap forward. And so there's so much intentionality, so little caprice about the way in which you're thinking about next year. But I'm wondering if you could maybe pull back a little bit and just share with our audience a little bit about just like what kind of work has gone into making these decisions with, like what kind of research, what kind of like colleagues, how have you gotten to the place where you're kind of so enthused and so confident in the ideas that we're putting out there?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I mean, we have a strong team. Like we have a team of administrators and educators that are good at their craft, are connected to the wider world of education, are well read in um, the most up-to-date research, and are like rooted in the strength of what we're doing, but are not afraid to change. And it's all in serving of the mission, right? So I think it's really easy to want to collaborate, and the bouncing of ideas in some of these meetings allow us to do all of our jobs better. Right. So John, you and I have been in the transitional working group, right? And we have a list of like, here are all the decisions that we need to make in terms of space, in terms of program connections, in terms of staffing structure, right? And we take kind of this list that we all generate together and the questions that we're asking, right? And the kind of every question is a little open-ended, right? And then someone who is the most closely tied to that work then takes that and then gets input from uh all the different people that they work with, right? So they might be that might be their department, that might be their division, that might be someone else that this work touches, like the counselor or the learning specialist, whoever it might be, right? And then based on the research, and sometimes we look at what other schools are doing too, right? And we don't have to always reinvent the wheel. Yeah, and then based on that work, we produce kind of a report and a recommendation, and then we bring it back to you and to the transition working group, and then we workshop that and try to improve that, right? And I think it's really kind of paid off, like we have even if we don't have answers to all the questions yet, we have a vision and we have intentionality and we know what are the things that are important for us as a community to maintain and what will serve our mission.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate just giving us a little glimpse behind the curtain because it just one of the things I've learned about this is just how easy it would be to do things kind of by fiat or even by whim, and how ultimately how ineffective and unbecoming of our mission and our community that would be. And so this kind of deep collaborative and conversational process, I had no idea how much patience and work it would require, but I'm so glad we've gone through, and I appreciate your leadership in that. And so that has me excited. I'm curious if as I look at the clock, I want to make sure we get this in. Look, if we're kind of summing up, like why should middle school families be excited about next year? You've expressed a ton of enthusiasm. I'm wondering if you can put a fine point on and say, just like folks who are trusting us with their boys, for which we're forever grateful. Why should they be pumped about what 25, 26 is going to bring to middle school?
Yeah, yeah. I think that 25, 26 is going to be the year where we get to see all of this vision, all of this work, all of this imagination come to fruition. Right, we've been planning, um we have been like putting things into action. We've been hiring, we have been creating systems and structures, and we get to see that vision kind of live out. Like I really do think that we're going to create the best middle school program in the city. Like not to kind of toot my own horns, but this best of both world idea of, we can offer everything that a K-8 school promises and remain a really, really good K-12 school, is just so powerful. Like you the other day you used the word strength on strength. And I think that really is where we're heading towards.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I appreciate you putting it out there. I don't think it's tooting our own horn. I don't think it's self-aggrandizing. I don't think there's any point in trying to do this if we're not trying to be the best at it that we can be. And if that means being the best in the city, so be it. So I just, Ophelia, I'm really, really grateful for your time, grateful for your leadership and just all your candor. And I hope for our friends and audience out there, I hope we're able to address some of the things which are on your mind, some of the hopes that you might have, some of the aspirations you're anticipating. If there's something that kind of persists that we didn't get to, particularly if you asked a very specific question that you didn't hear addressed here. I hope you'll throw it our way via email. We're we're pretty easy to find, or come around the building for some conversation. But most, I want to thank our friends again for all the trust that being part of Browning involves, and we're going to do our best to honor that going forward with new spatial arrangements, new program, and ongoing enthusiasm for what Browning can be. So I'm going to say goodnight now. Thanks to everybody, and look forward to seeing you down the road. Ophelia, thanks so much.
Thank you, John, and thank you everybody for coming.
Take care,
Have a
everyone.
good
We'll see you
night.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye.